Welcome back to Hoop Slams. We're the show that knowingly records our conversations. My name is Marc Griffin, aka Montreal Marc. I'm joined by my partners in crime, Phil Boileau, Sporting Phil, and Justin Rowan, Cavs Canada. We're talking a whole bevy of basketball today. We're going to start with the Boston Celtics, who the other night pulled off what may be the most monumental win of the NBA regular season, beating the Golden State Warriors, the Oracle. Justin, how did they win against the Juggernaut?
Well, luck was certainly a factor. Klay Thompson and Steph Curry both missed shots, but they did what a lot of teams have had success doing against them, including Boston earlier this season in Boston. They put Avery Bradley on Steph Curry and really made him work. And then on the defensive end of the floor, or at least when Steph Curry's on defense, they made him run through a lot of screens. They really made him exert a lot of energy on that end, which is something we also saw originally the Spurs do with Tony Parker. They would just put him through screen after screen after screen. They played good defense. The most surprising thing to come from that game, in my opinion, was the fact that Boston beat them playing their style. A lot of shots. It was a more up-and-down game. It wasn't the traditional kind of slow-down approach that we've seen work against the Warriors this season. So it was a little funny to see them win that route.
Phil, Golden State was without Iguodala and Ezeli, and also Boston was out without your man, Jay Crowder. Talk about Crowder for the guys. He's really off-the-radar gem in the league right now.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about GMs of the year and, administration side, Jay Crowder is one of those guys that won't get enough hype. But, when we're talking about a league that's full of 3 and D guys, and that's where the value added is, I mean, punch that in with his toughness, and I think he becomes kind of their version of Draymond Green in weird levels. He plays a little bit more wing, but I think he's an emotional leader on the defensive end, and his ability to understand his role on offense and spread the floor. I mean, that team doesn't have an ego, and I think that's the number one reason why they're able to be successful. I mean, when you look at other teams play against Golden State, when they fall behind, they have to go to this 1 or 2 guys, their stars. And I know they have Isaiah Thomas as their all-star, but it's a team that I think is made for. I mean, when we were looking before the trade deadline at possible, Justin could elaborate on this better, but it was an Avery Bradley and someone for Kevin Love possibility idea. That whole Avery Bradley in the finals against Steph Curry was something I was really looking forward to. But it's a whole team of guys who are just good at their position. They can all play defense, and they can throw so many looks at you, and they're not reliant on one guy. Because I think Golden State is actually better than they get credit for, really shutting down your top 1 or 2 guys and making you look for that 3rd, 4th option. And I think that plays to Boston's strength because it's a whole team of 3rd, 4th options.
Right. Justin, is Avery Bradley first team all defense like they're trying to plug him as right now?
I don't know about that. You could certainly make a case for it. He is one of the better defenders at that position in the league. He's a unique player. He's a combo guard that can run some point if need be, which really does give Boston more versatility and other options. When it comes to defense, I don't know if he's first team all defense, but he's certainly someone that should get some considerations for all defensive team. He's just one of those players that stood out this season as someone that's bothered Curry the same way that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Phil, a name we haven't mentioned yet, Matt Stevens. I believe he's one of the elite guys coaching-wise in this league. We got to see him coach 2 years ago. What stands out to you about him?
Well, I mean, Brad Stevens, look at the roster. I mean, there are very few guys who, we're looking at the roster, we're talking about Coach of the Year, who I feel have maximized their players better than he has. I mean, we've got Terry Stotts, we've got some guys from Portland, we got from other teams, but look at where Isaiah Thomas was considered. Look how they've used him. Look how they've balanced that guard position between Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart, how the egos haven't taken over. Look at how they've dealt with injuries. Look at how they've dealt with, the whole Kelly Olynyk thing could have gone sour after the whole Kevin Love thing, in different ways. He comes across as one of those coaches that you could literally give him anyone. I kind of liken him to how when Doc Rivers took the Orlando Magic back in, I think, 2001 to the finals, to the playoffs. And, you looked at that team, you're like, these guys don't really belong. And I think if you'd give this team an average coach, I think you're looking at the lottery. I think right then and there, that explanation deserves him Coach of the Year, or really close to.
Last question, Justin. I'm going to throw this out there. I think it's highly unlikely, but Is there any possibility at all that Kevin Durant goes to Boston this summer?
I'd say there's a possibility. We haven't really seen free agents go to Boston for various reasons in the past, but this is one of the first times that they really have had the cap space to bring someone in like that. I can see them making a big pitch to a guy like Al Horford, who they pursued at the deadline. If they're able to bring in Horford or maybe Kevin Love, that might strengthen their pitch, because they really do have a lot of strong role guys, and you would just wonder how much better they could be if they do get that star or two to kind of smooth things along and take them to that next level. So I wouldn't rule it out. I certainly wouldn't say Boston's the favorite for that, but they should be considered, in my opinion, by Durant.
Okay, moving from one marquee franchise to another, the Celtics to the Lakers. D'Angelo Russell involved with, let's just call it an incident this week, with the recording of a conversation of his teammate Nick Young talking about his adulterous lifestyle, bro code. Phil, where do you stand on the bro code in the NBA?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of almost non-basketball fans about this, and they kind of think that Nick Young's almost getting a pass because he's literally cheating on his girlfriend. But when we're talking about literally, that's the stuff that builds camaraderie, right? I mean, a talk in a hotel room between two guys, 25 and under, you're not expecting that to go public. And I don't care what D'Angelo Russell says of how did this go public and all this. It's one of those things you just don't do. I mean, how you think pressing record. I mean, look, we've all done dumb things in terms of trying to make people laugh, but you have to know that as a rookie, you kind of got to keep it quiet. I mean, maybe you do that year 2 or 3 on another level, but it really hurts. I think he bounces back, just because if he was one of like a fringe draft pick, a late second rounder, I think this guy is just gone. I mean, the fact that they're talking about maybe moving Nick Young because they can't be together. I mean, it's kind of weird to blame Nick Young, but you have to keep the better player. Yeah, he definitely broke bro code, and it's going to take a long time for people to believe in him. But professionally, people don't want to lose either, right? So I think they're going to push past this faster than if it wasn't in sports.
Yeah, I think people forget that Nick Young is actually 30, not under 25. He acts that way, but Justin, if you were in these guys' shoes, what would you be? Will you be getting physical? What would you do?
That's tough to say, and it's funny to hear them say that they're trying to move Nick Young. They've tried trading him for 2 years. Nobody wants him, so that's not exactly a new thing with the situation. Would I get physical? I don't know about that. It's funny because the debate really, at least the debate that I've seen, has been whether D'Angelo Russell made the right decision or not. Would you make the same decision in that situation? I certainly wouldn't. I think going publicly is the wrong answer, no matter what your stance is on whether or not it's your obligation to inform somebody. But I don't necessarily agree with the notion that Nick Young is getting a pass. He's just somebody that everyone's given up on. Everyone knows that he did something wrong. But the interesting debate is the Russell side of it. So I think that's why more conversation is steered that way, at least with the basketball community, or at least maybe that's what I hope the case is. I don't think it's worth anything getting physical over. When it comes to Russell's relationship with the team, he's the only one that you'd really point to as being, okay, this could be a foundational piece. Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson have shown some nice things, but Russell's the one you build around. So if you have to get rid of the rest of the team, I think you go ahead and you do that.
Phil, I mean, this is something that happens from time to time, even with the Lakers. Kobe Bryant, during his rape trial, had snitched on Shaq in his lifestyle away from the court. What do you think about this in terms of the NBA in general?
Well, I was having an interesting conversation with Justin about this kind of off camera, and this is the new age social media world where, were things like this not happening years past? Of course they were. I mean, it's just here he slipped up because he actually taped it, and people are hacking phones, forgetting to do this and that. Listen, I don't think this is anything new. I just think usually this gets handled internally, and now I think the Lakers are actually handling it internally faster than the outside media is, because they want to play this up as a bigger story than it is. I mean, look, he did the wrong thing, and they shunned him in a couple games, but there could be worse things for a young rookie to learn by, especially. He's known to be a little immature and a bit of humility this way, but I don't think this is anything that's new to the NBA. I just think it's new to the average fan because of how social media has made it apparent.
And Justin, if you're Byron Scott, do you play a hand at all in this, or you just let these guys deal with it on their own?
If I'm Byron Scott, I change a lot of my life decisions, so it's hard to say. But if I was in charge of the Lakers, if I was running the team as a coach, I'd get involved. I think it's your responsibility. If nobody's stepping up from a leadership or mentor standpoint for you to fill that role, especially Byron Scott, who's had a lot of experience bringing up elite point guards in the past. Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving come to mind. But I think you intervene. I don't think you let players settle it themselves. We've seen players settle gambling debts and things like that poorly, so this isn't exactly foreign territory. You don't want this to become the next Washington Wizards where guys are bringing guns in the locker room. So I think you step in and you be kind of proactive in minimizing the damage of this situation.
Okay, so let's switch from one LA franchise to the other. Blake Griffin is returning to the LA Clippers after a 3-month hiatus, starting with the broken hand in Toronto, a fight with the equipment manager, and then the quadricep injury that lingered on for nearly half the season. Phil, I'll throw it to you first. Let's talk about the 4-game suspension that he just committed to. Is that a bit of a hoax? I mean, apparently he couldn't even play for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something really weird internally with that team and him. I mean, I've been worried about a guy like him forever, where a lot of his game was predicated on his athleticism. I realize he's stretching his abilities, the ability to dribble, pass, shoot. But there's just something fishy there. Him, DeAndre Jordan, it doesn't seem like there's too much talent there for that not to work. And I think something past that, like I think it was interesting how in our other segment we spoke of, D'Angelo Russell, the other LA team, and everything coming to light. But I think everything here, there's a lot happening that's not being brought to light. And I don't know where I stand with this one. I think Blake Griffin secretly is an odd piece on that team.
Justin, I mean, how, as a Clippers franchise, do you adjust? You're a week away, 2 weeks away from the postseason. What are they going to do in terms of chemistry right now?
It's not like this is a new piece that they haven't played with before. I know they struggled early on in the season, but I don't think that necessarily was Blake Griffin's fault. It's not like he's a tremendously selfish player. You're talking about arguably the best player on the team and a potential MVP candidate here. 23 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, 5 assists. Like, he makes everybody better. And last year in the playoffs, with Chris Paul injured and limited, he was the best player against the Spurs. Without him, they don't advance to the next round. And if Chris Paul was healthy, they'd probably make it to the conference finals. So this is a big-time difference maker there. I think some of the "are they better without Blake Griffin" talk and all of that is a little bit overblown. Chris Paul's been doing more than he should have to, and that's probably worn him out a little bit this season. But in terms of chemistry, there's going to be a few hiccups, but as things currently stand, they probably get the Memphis Grizzlies first round, unless the Grizzlies continue to completely go off the rails and nobody else or someone else catches them. But that's a first round bye if you get the Grizzlies. So they're going to have a little bit of extra time to figure out the chemistry.
Phil, I would say they're in a lot of ways the big wild card in this playoffs. They have the talent, but that they really haven't played together much of the year. How far can they go if they click? I mean, keeping in mind that, like Justin said, they did beat not Golden State, but San Antonio last year in 7.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have the talent to be able to go. I kind of liken them best case kind of in the Oklahoma kind of bracket. I think you can have your San Antonio, Golden State, then you have your OKC, maybe Clippers, just because I think while talent-wise they can probably stand with the top teams, both those teams have large chances of implosion to me, and I don't really trust them. I like Paul Pierce, I like Jeff Green, I like a lot of their players. I think playing without Blake Griffin actually, on a weird note, allows some of your role players larger roles to get ready for the playoffs, right? So if they're demanded to step up, they've now come into that. DeAndre Jordan had a little bit larger of a role. I think they're a scary team. I think any team led by Chris Paul is going to be a tough out. But I still think there's something chemistry-wise. Maybe it's the Doc Rivers effect. Maybe, like we've said in shows past, maybe he's not quite the coach everyone hypes him up to be. I just don't look talent-wise. I believe in them, but my gut feeling says they're not meeting LeBron.
Justin, I mean, anything can happen in the playoffs. We all know this. Is there any chance they get to the finals?
I don't know about finals. They're going to play the Golden State Warriors in the second round, and that's a pretty tall task. They have matched up well against the Warriors in the past, so maybe there is some possibility for them to make it a series. But I just can't see them getting through both the Warriors and then either the San Antonio Spurs or the Oklahoma City Thunder. I just think that's too much to ask out of them, especially with not having a full season to develop that chemistry with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. I think it's integrating Blake isn't going to hurt them, but he's still probably not going to be at the level that he is when he's 100%, and the team isn't going to be at the level that they would be if they played 82 games with Paul and Griffin. So I just think it's too tall of a task, and I can't really see them making the finals.
Okay, switching to our last topic. It's been a running theme here at Hoops Lounge talking about the Kobe Bryant farewell tour and other guys of his generation who are not getting the limelight that they deserve. I want to talk about one guy. I think he's a guy we all cherish. Vince Carter, former slam dunk champion, Air Canada. Justin, beyond the dunks, we all know about the dunks. What else about his game has always stood out to you?
I think recently the thing I've been really impressed about is how well he seems to have aged his game as a veteran. He's gone from superstar to role player to now reserve player very, very smoothly. There's been no hiccups. Rick Carlisle complimented him on how good of a job he did working with the team's young players when he was there. He did an exceptional job with O.J. Mayo, who struggled after he left Dallas and Vince Carter. So he's another guy kind of like Paul Pierce, who's been able to continuously reinvent his game, keep his body in great shape. For all the talk of him being injury-prone and stuff like that when he was in Toronto, he's been relatively healthy since then, and he's taken good care of his body. So he's someone that's kind of crushed every narrative that's come across his path throughout his career, except maybe not being able to win a championship, but that's kind of more circumstantial than on him, in my opinion.
Yeah, the shot he missed in 2001, Phil, against the Sixers off the back of the rim, is that the most monumental moment in his career?
I mean, I think in terms of basketball purists, it may be close. I think the Frederick Weiss dunk, in terms of the casual fan, may be the most rememberable moment. I mean, I think to the casual fan, he'll always be remembered as a dunker, unfortunately. But like to Justin's point, I'm just looking at his career. Being 39 years old, he only the last 2 years has he averaged under 10 points a game, which is kind of impressive for a guy who hasn't been the guy since, we'll say, maybe Orlando, where he averaged 15.1 points. I mean, in Dallas, he definitely wasn't the guy. For those 3 years, Phoenix, he wasn't the guy. Even Orlando,
Orlando is Dwight's team.
Yeah, exactly. And I found that a bit ironic too, how T-Mac went from Toronto to Orlando, but they didn't line up that way. They could have done it all again. I think that, or I think a lot of Toronto fans will remember how he was saying how, well, that story was so thrown all over the place, but how, he wasn't trying for the last little bit and this and that. And I think his kind of messy divorce from Toronto is how I'm unfortunately going to remember it. I think he brought he brought relevancy to Toronto as an NBA franchise. I think that's one of the most notable bits. And I remember a couple of those years just looking at, like the 99, 2000, 2001 with Toronto, averaging between 25 and 28 points a game. It was just one of the most unstoppable. I mean, half man, half amazing. Like, he was a basketball god. I mean, like, there were guys who were good in that time. I mean, obviously Kobe and such, but I don't know if anyone had the fanfare. And I don't know, even right now, as big as Kevin Durant is, big as Steph Curry is, I think his numbers, accolades, and what he's done doesn't represent what Vince Carter is. I think Vince Carter is a beacon for the NBA, and I think he was just a marketing marvel.
I'll tell you a quick story. Like, I lived in Toronto during that time period, 2000, 2001, and I got to see him play. And the Air Canada Centre was just electric every night. And then I was living in LA in 2002, and they came to town to play the Lakers. And I could not believe how much hype he was getting around Los Angeles. I'm like, it was just, I couldn't quantify it. Having a guy on a Canadian basketball team being the epicenter in Hollywood, it was just, I never saw that coming. Justin, here's something that needs to be kind of considered. Do you see him as being, in a way, the savior of basketball in Canada?
I don't know about savior. I think he's kind of the godfather of Canadian basketball. This is actually good timing. I rewatched the documentary that Sportsnet put together of Vince Carter by Michael Grange, the reimagining. And you have Tristan Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, guys like that that have said, I wouldn't be playing basketball if it wasn't for Vince Carter, the attention that he brought. Steve Nash, probably the greatest Canadian basketball player ever, but I don't know if Nash even had the same influence on the game that Vince, or at least on Canadian basketball, that Vince Carter did. I think his legacy was unfairly tarnished in Toronto. It's funny to hear, Sam Mitchell's come out and said this, and Vince also confirmed it, but the day before he was traded, he said, I don't want to be traded from Toronto. He said, if you feel like I'm in your way and that I'm going to hurt the future of the franchise, then go ahead and move me, but I'm committed to being here and I want to be in Toronto. And unfortunately, they moved him anyways for just an awful trade, probably one of the most lopsided in NBA history.
100%, I have to agree with you on that one. It was just despicable.
Yeah, and then they trashed him. They dragged his name through the mud for all those years, and I think it really was unfair. As a terribly dysfunctional franchise at that time, and they were just trying to save face. So it's unfortunate, but to me, Vince Carter is absolutely the godfather of Canadian basketball.
Phil, it seems like they have really mended the fences between he and the Raptors franchise, at least on the surface. Do you think a day will come where they retire his jersey?
I think so. I think, fans and seeing all these big players like you guys both mentioned, kind of giving him credit for bringing, basketball to such a large extent to the Six or to Toronto, that I think it just shows that they've gone to that next level of, they have that professional situation team, and it's just saying, hey, you helped us get to this point. We've mended the fences in between, and I think it would just be a great PR move, and I could see them doing it. There's no reason not to. Like, since all these stories came out, look, people make mistakes, people make hasty moves. We're all human beings, but I think at the end of the day, it only adds validity to the franchise, and I think Vince is going to want it eventually. So I think if both groups want it, it's going to happen.
Speaking about the future for Vince, I saw a game last year where he was playing for Memphis, but he was injured. So they let him sit in the booth for about 10 minutes and do play-by-play, actually color commentary. And I got to say, he was fantastic. And I have a feeling if he does not go into coaching down the road, because he loves to coach the veteran, the young guys as a vet, I could actually see him in the broadcast booth. So plenty in the future in store for Vince Carter. Phil, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, thank you. Speaking of future broadcasters, hopefully you'll be joining us here on hoopslounge.com for all your basketball news, everything in between. Marc Griffin, Justin Rowan, and myself, Phil Boileau. Twitter handles are in the description below. Cavs Canada, Montreal Marc, and Sporting Phil. Keep the conversation going. Tons of new stuff coming. Great new stuff coming up. Some of the stuff we need to keep under wrap, and a lot of stuff we're going to bring to you daily. So from all of us, thanks, and we'll keep you in the lounge.
See ya.